In tonight's Dateline Defense, the diminishing prospects for peace in Syria. A string of battlefield victories by government troops have bolstered President Bashar al-Assad and plunged the rebels into disarray. ISIS still holds about a third of the country. Meanwhile, regional rivals Iran and Saudi Arabia are locked in a proxy war on the ground. Joining me with the latest is Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He's a decorated combat veteran, author, PhD, and executive vice president of the Burke-Macgregor Group. Doug, the civil war in Syria is 5 years old. Peace talks in Geneva are scheduled for next Monday, but the conflict appears to be ramping up, not slowing down. Am I missing something here?
No, you're not. In fact, this is likely to drag on for several more years. I suppose we could have a miracle and things could stop, but let's look at what is happening in Geneva right now. We don't even know who's actually going to attend. They can't even agree on the various parties that say they want to be there. There is just so much bad blood, and there is a readiness to expend more blood. So the likelihood that Geneva is going to produce any immediate outcome is extremely low.
Over the weekend, Iran delivered on its nuclear commitment to the United States. Sanctions were lifted, prisoners exchanged, and monitoring will continue. Is this a diplomatic triumph or travesty?
In the short run, it is unambiguously a triumph, and this is why. 8.5 tons of enriched uranium have already been shipped out of the country. That's 98% of what Iran had to build bombs. 12,000 centrifuges have been shut down that are essential to the process of enriching uranium. And finally, the heavy water reactor has been cemented over. Iran is now at least a decade away from closing in on any bomb-making capability. Now, Iran got money back that it already owned. But we also got something. We got more than just a temporary halt. The question is, what will things look like in 10 years? I don't think any of us can answer that question.
You know, this is so different from what we hear on right-wing talk radio. I agree with you that why do we keep hearing that this is such a bad deal? Is it because it's a political year, Doug?
Well, it's part of it. I also think there's an enormous amount of money behind anyone who's willing to speak out against the agreement and urge military action against Iran. But the truth is, neither we nor the Iranians are particularly interested in going to war. And this agreement makes it extremely difficult for Israel to preempt and engage in an attack on Iran. So I suppose we're still going to hear this sort of thing because it's a way to attack Mr. Obama. But I think this particular battle is over. Mr. Obama won it, and ultimately I think the United States was the winner in this contest.
Now, earlier, Doug, I mentioned the proxy war in Syria between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Will the nuclear deal have any impact on the ground there?
You know, I think it will, for the simple reason that both Turkey and the Saudis were looking at the requirement to field their own nuclear capability if Iran became a true nuclear power. That's been halted, so that changes to some extent the terms of conflict. Does it end the conflict? No.
Now, today, Pakistan offered to host Saudi-Iran reconciliation talks. Will they take that offer seriously, do you think?
You know, I hope they do. Pakistan is an interesting player in all of this because Pakistan is very close to both Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And in fact, the Pakistanis have made it very clear that they are willing to provide both Turkey and Saudi Arabia with nuclear technology. So this means that if they're intervening in this process, they want good relations with Iran because Iran has a very close relationship with India. So Pakistan has a vested interest in working through this. Whether or not the various parties will take them seriously, I don't know. I certainly hope so.
And they've got to be in the mood. You've got to reach a certain point where they're going to say, okay, this beats the alternative. We can't talk about fighting in Syria without mentioning Turkey. Former U.S. Ambassador Robert Pearson wrote an op-ed for Politico this month about Turkish President Erdogan. Here's an excerpt. Erdogan's flirtation with radical Islam in Syria and march from liberal democratic reformer to illiberal populist authoritarian have confused Americans trying to deal with Turkey. That's certainly a true point. Bring us up to date, Doug.
Well, he's right about confusing us, but Mr. Erdogan is not confused. We need to understand something. Mr. Erdogan is a committed Islamist. An Islamist, whether he is Turkish, whether he's an Arab, whether he's Iranian, believes that the society in which that person lives should be entirely shaped by Islam, Islamic law, Quranic law, traditions, customs, and so forth. Once you elect an Islamist to power, he stays in power. And that's the problem with Mr. Erdogan. People don't seem to understand that simply because he was willing to work through the democratic process, that doesn't make him necessarily a good guy, because his ultimate aim is to subvert it. And that's what Mr. Erdogan has done in Turkey. Right now, the legislature in that country is almost meaningless. It's largely a rubber stamp for whatever Mr. Erdogan and his Islamist party want to do.
All right, well, meanwhile, the European Union is trying to work out a plan to redistribute 120,000 asylum seekers among the 28-nation bloc. More than 1 million migrants arrived in the EU just last year. Some countries have been more welcoming than others. It's a human rights crisis that we've talked about before, Doug. It's also a logistical nightmare. Can European society fully integrate these refugees, or do they spell the end of the EU as we know it?
Well, the short answer to the first question is no. And we need to keep in mind that the majority of the people coming to Europe right now from the Middle East, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and North Africa aren't interested in being integrated. They're interested in benefiting from the largesse of European society and economic prosperity. And they're interested, to the extent that they are able, in building mosques and ultimately Islamicizing Europe. So I think the notion of integration is a dead end, and that is beginning to sink in with most Europeans. Now, as far as the second question is concerned, a lot of us have wondered just how remarkable it is that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, along with the European Union, have survived this long. I'm not sure that we can expect these institutions to last much longer, simply because the interests that emerged after World War II that brought them to life simply don't exist anymore. The people that live in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and so forth have a completely different set of geostrategic interests from the people that live in Italy, Spain, Portugal, and France. The sort of unifying threat picture that once held all of these together no longer exists. So the best I think we can hope for down the line is that the European Union is essentially an area where people can do business without paying tariffs and taxes over borders. But much beyond that, no. I think the European Union is on its way out.
I'm afraid you're right. It's a whole new playing field. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, Executive Vice President of the Burke-Macgregor Group. Thanks again, Doug.
Thank you.